PodcastCoug Season 6, Episode 1.
You're listening to the PodcastCoug Radio Network with your host, James Laurie. The PodcastCoug is your weekly Coug on Demand show featuring all things Cougs and Washington State Cougar football. And now, here is your host, PodcastCoug.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another season of the PodcastCoug. I am James Laurie, the PodcastCoug, and you are listening to the 6th season of the PodcastCoug, where we're all things Cougar football. 30 minutes Coug talk. We're talking about the strength of our team and our upcoming first home game, our home opener against Utah State in Pullman Saturday night. Hey, welcome back to season 6 of the PodcastCoug. Great to be back. It's been a busy, crazy year and a crazy last year with the pandemic of the 2020. And here we are. We're rolling it through 2021 starting on Saturday night, and everybody's excited. And we talked about sacrificing last year, and how about the amount of sacrifice that these guys had to make? You know what I mean? That to play, to, on and off the field, and that constant workout consistently day in and day out during a COVID year, just the difficulties all around that. No starting quarterback yet named for the Cougs. I know Rolo knows who it is. I think the players know who it is. It's going to be Garantano or DeLora. Jarrett Garantano, welcome to Washington State being a Coug. Jaden DeLore's second year back, second year now, and Nick isn't saying who's going to start against the Aggies. Players know. I think I know who it's going to. I'm guessing it's going to be Garantano. Something tells me it's going to be Jarrett Garantano. So that's my guess. There's that element of gamesmanship being played here, and I would bet that everybody on that team knows. The team knows who the guy is. I just think both of them are taking equal reps, and they're going to be ready, and they're going to be right, and they're going to just be ready, right? So it's, I think Garantano's the guy, right? So expect him to be playing all the games. He's from the SEC, a graduate transfer from Tennessee. He played in 41 games on his career at Tennessee, started for 32, and I think he's just going to be to just really be able to step right into that huddle and roll with it, right? But then we've got DeLora. I mean, who knows? It could be DeLora. And having the experience, with his run and shoot and his ability to scramble. And remember, it's the run and shoot first. It's not the shoot and run. So DeLora is all about the run and shoot, and so is Rolo. I mean, it's a natural for him. He had a little quirks last year, played 4 games last year, including some questionable, plays. But I think, when it goes right down to it, I think we got the right guy. Either way, we're going to be fine, right? It's just a no-brainer either way, right? So does it really matter? I mean, we're okay with quarterback. Does it really matter at this point? I think we could be talking about our running backs and some offense and defense. What really is more important at this point, I think, Borghi and McIntosh, right? And how about those guys? How about Brendan Jackson and Ron Stone and Jahad Woods? We got some dudes. We got dudes on defense, and we got guys on defense and that we haven't seen for a long time, and they are seniors, and why not? Why not have a great year? I mean, these are all Leach's guys. These are not Rolo guys, okay? And Mike Leach set us up to win, and I think we might have a good year, okay? Better than 6-6. I mean, these are Mike Leach's guys, and he was bringing in. We've got some talent. We got some guys. So back to the quarterback, Garantano or DeLora. Cameron Cooper's number 3. Our number 3 guy, but remember, we talked about it. Borghi is healthy. We got Borghi ready to go, and Deion McIntosh, averaging 80 yards a game last year. So we've got that. Now, quickly, we're going to go down to our offensive starters for this year. They're named Deshaun Stribling, right? And Donovan Ollie, and Calvin Jackson, and Travell Harris, and Liam Ryan, Jarrett Kingston, Brian Green, and Cade Beresford, Luke, and Abraham Lucas. Jarrett, we talked about Jarrett Garantano and Borghi and Ron Stone, Amir Mujahid, right? And Amir Crowder, Brennan Jackson, Jahad Woods, Justice Rogers, and Jalen Watson and Khalid Jahabril and Daniel Isom. These are all starters on defense. Derek Langsford and Armani Marsh. So these guys are starting, and we got some guys there. They're going to play. They're playmakers. We definitely got a senior-laden team, right? So last year being the pandemic, which ended with Washington State at 1-3, and wasn't really it was really unfulfilled, right? And we had a lot of games forfeited. It was a year to remember. Then we got the Apple Cup forfeited, which was going to be played in Pullman, and that got wiped out. And so now we're we play in Montlake this year, so we skipped Pullman, which nobody talks about. Why can't, it's very unfortunate we lost that home game with Washington. The Cougs didn't have the proper time to install and adjust the new coaching staff's schematics, with Rolo coming in. It was just a really quick transformation. And so they really didn't have the proper time. And there were injuries, and then COVID-19 hit. And, it's just the whole year was just, here we are with a redo. So basically we're stocked up on offense. And finally we've got some good defense guys as well. And we've got time. They've had time to learn Nick's run and shoot. So I think it's going to help a lot. Majority of last year's standouts are back, and we've got depth at every position. We're talking, we've been talking about all through fall camp. And, the key guys that we're really talking about are Max Borghi, Abraham Lucas, Jahad Woods, and Jalen Watson, And, throw in some wide receivers, C.J. Moore and, just Deshaun Stribling and Donovan Ollie. So, and safety, we got George Hicks and Khalid. I always struggle with that Dajabril, and so he's the alternating free safety. So on computer, our secondary is deep from last year, and I think we might have a good year. Still, there's a position group that's been marked by concerns in recent past, and that's our defensive backs, because last year they got boat raced by a high tempo opponents of over 300 passing yards a game. So we've got some work to do with our defensive backs, but the key to success, I think, this year is a highly successful Garantano or Delora, and feeding Borghi and developing one or two dependable pass catching options, and defensively fine tuning that pass coverage. Primarily the issue, which was last year, and we were it was horrible. But we go 9 games before a bye this year, and which is going to come in handy. Hopefully we're healthy. And although last season's outcomes weren't anything to brag about, we seem to have a great amount of talent for this year. We're deep in depth. We got seniors. The roster looks great. There's a possibility we might hit a bowl. We are predicted, to finish last, which is kind of normal. I think we're going to do better than that. But I don't think we've got everything to really take it all the way. So we'll just, obviously, nobody knows. Really, nobody knows. So the Cougs should be favored in half of our games this year, right? So, and speaking about games, we're going to talk about Utah State. The Aggies are in Pullman Saturday night. That's coming up next, right here on the second half of the Podcast Coug.
Hey, Coug fans. You're podcasting with James Laurie and the PodcastCoug Radio Network. The Podcast Coug is your weekly Coug on Demand show, featuring all things Cougar football in Washington State. To help you get through the week, hit the subscribe button or check us out on iTunes, the App Store, iOS, Google Play, Stitcher, or at PodcastCoug.com.
The real estate agent you work with matters, and a great agent helps you own the home of your dreams. And your dreams come true with James Laurie at Coldwell Banker Bain, representing clients like you 24/7. From condos to colonials and everything in between. If you're selling, buying, need a price analysis, or just a contractor referral, Ask James, winner of the 2015 through 2019 International Coldwell Banker Diamond Award, with dozens and dozens of 5-star Zillow reviews, and Seattle Magazine's 5-star award winner for 2018 through 2020. James Laurie, Coldwell Banker Bain, at 425-466-3672 or jameslaurie.net. Rock solid results.
You're listening to the Podcast Coug.
Two running backs in with the quarterback. Signals called. All man in motion going through to the right side. Handoff. Wings out to the right side. Touchdown, Washington State.
You are listening to the Podcast Coug.
Welcome back to the second half of the Podcast Coug. I am James Laurie, the Podcast Coug, where we're all things Cougar football, all things Coug. It's our 6th season of the Podcast Coug, and here we go. Utah State, Saturday night in Pullman, 8 o'clock, Martin Stadium, Pac-12 Networks. It's our home opener. Go Cougs, the students section. Got a lot of students that have never been to a home Coug football game, freshmen. And I thought my daughter would be there. She's 18 and she is 3,000 miles away in Virginia Beach at Regent University. But I groomed her as a Coug her whole life, and that's okay. She chose to go elsewhere, and that's important. It's her choice. But there's a lot of students in a lot of freshmen that are going to be in the stands at Martin Stadium for the very first time. Let's hope we fill those stands up to students. They're going to be busy all day Saturday doing what students do on Saturday, and let's hope that entire section is full, right? So here we go. Utah State, it's looking for their first road win against a Power 5 opponent since they had a 10-7 win at Kansas State. The last time was 1971. It was in September of 1971 was their last Power 5 victory on the road. It's a long time ago. The odds are against the Aggies, and check this out. The Aggies have never won a road game against a Pac-8, a Pac-10, or a Pac-12 opponent. Never, ever, ever. I will repeat that. Utah State has never won a road game against a Pac-8, Pac-10, or a Pac-12 opponent. Are we going to be the first, right? Are they going to beat the Cougs on Saturday night? Hey, we have to watch and be there or watch and see, right? So Utah State has, by the way, the second youngest coaching staff in the nation. These guys, their staff is young, not just, young in age. It's like they've got 10 full-time assistant coaches, and they're all like in their 20s, their 30s, maybe in their 40s. And, they're just young guys, and it's, pretty interesting. They've had a lot of turnover in the last several years, and the series with the Cougs, it's only 3 games. Utah State and Washington State, they're meeting, it's going to be the 4th game in the series on Saturday night, but the Cougs hold a 2-1 advantage. We've only played them 3 times. Washington State won its first 2 games, right, back in 1949 and 1950. And then the last time they played was 60 years ago. It was Joe Albee Stadium, and that was 1961. September 30th, 1961 was the last time Washington State played Utah State. And guess what? Aggies won 34-14 in Spokane, right? So 60 years ago. That's crazy. Utah State and Washington State 60 years ago is a long time. But looking back at that team, that 1961 Utah State team, they finished with a 9-1-1 record, and it ended ranked 10th in the AP. That was their highest rank. Utah State's highest final ranking in school history was 60 years ago, 1961. That was the last time the team, that school, went undefeated during their regular season. Right? They were 9-0. And then they were 9-0 and won. They had 1 tie, and then they lost to Baylor in New York City at the Gotham Bowl. Now, who thought that New York City had a bowl game in Manhattan? But I guess they did in 1961. So that was their best season ever, And here we are, 60 years later, we're playing them again. Typically, the podcast Coug is 30 minutes. We've got a really short episode for this episode 1. We want to thank you guys for hanging out with us every year. Subscribe if you haven't. It's going to come back to you every week. It's great. We're having a lot of fun with this. And make sure you hit that subscribe button. We're going to see you on Saturday night, 8 o'clock, right? It's going to be fun. Utah State, Washington State. Hey, have a great Saturday game day. Have a great Saturday night. Take care. God bless, and go Cougs.
You've been listening to the Podcast Coug with your host, James Laurie. The Podcast Coug is your weekly Coug on Demand show featuring all things Cougs and Washington State Cougar football. This has been a presentation of the Podcast Coug Radio Network. Find us at podcastcoug.com.
T